नमस्कार दोस्तों, साल 2024 में संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा यानी कि यूएनजीए का यह 79वां सत्र था। संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा यानी कि यूएन जनरल असेंबली या यूएनजीए संयुक्त राष्ट्र यानी कि यूएन का एक प्रमुख अंग है जिसमें सभी सदस्य देशों का प्रतिनिधित्व होता है। यानी कि संसार में कुल अभी तक 193 देश हैं जिनके यूएनजीए में मान्यता है। इसकी स्थापना 1945 में हुई थी और यह संयुक्त राष्ट्र के सबसे प्रमुख नीति निर्माण और प्रतिनिधित्व करने वाले मंच के रूप में काम करता है। सभी 193 सदस्य देश इसमें शामिल होते हैं और प्रत्येक देश को समान रूप से एक मत का अधिकार प्राप्त होता है। संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा यानी यूएनजीए के 79वें सत्र के दौरान विभिन्न अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्दों पर चर्चा हुई, जिनमें जलवायु परिवर्तन, वैश्विक सुरक्षा, मानवाधिकार और सतत विकास शामिल थे। संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा यानी यूएनजीए के 79वें सत्र के दौरान कई देशों ने सुरक्षा परिषद यानी कि यूएनएससी में सुरक्षा की आवश्यकता पर जोर दिया, जिसमें भारत को अस्थायी सदस्य के रूप में शामिल करने की बात भी शामिल थी। सुधार का उद्देश्य परिषद को अधिक प्रतिनिधित्वपूर्ण, पारदर्शी और प्रभावी बनाना है। कई देशों ने भारत को यूएनएससी का स्थायी सदस्य बनाने का समर्थन किया। प्रमुख देशों में अमेरिका, रूस, फ्रांस और यूके ने पहले भी अपने समर्थन की पुष्टि की है। साथ ही जापान, जर्मनी और ब्राजील जैसे देशों ने भी भारत को शामिल करने का समर्थन किया। अफ्रीकी और लैटिन अमेरिकी देशों के प्रतिनिधियों ने भी परिषद में सुधार और नए अस्थायी सदस्यों की आवश्यकता पर बल दिया है। वीटो पावर को लेकर थोड़ा स्थिति स्पष्ट नहीं है। कई देश इस बात से असहमत हैं कि नए अस्थायी सदस्यों को शामिल करना चाहिए, लेकिन वीटो पावर पर आम सहमति नहीं बन पाई है। कुछ देश वीटो पावर का विस्तार करने के पक्ष में हैं, जबकि कुछ देश इसका विरोध कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि उनका मानना है कि इससे निर्णय लेने की प्रक्रिया में बाधा उत्पन्न हो सकती है। भारत के अस्थायी सदस्यता के दावे को व्यापक समर्थन मिला है, लेकिन वीटो पावर देने का मुद्दा विवादित बना हुआ है। यह सुरक्षा परिषद में सुधार के बड़े और जटिल मुद्दे का हिस्सा है, जिसमें कई हितधारकों के विचार शामिल है। इस बार का यूएनजीए यानी कि 79 में भारत के प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी का संबोधन कैसा रहा? तो जी हाँ, बहुत ही शानदार रहा। संक्षिप्त उनका संबोधन था, लेकिन बड़ा ही शानदार था। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ने संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा के 79वें सत्र में अपना संबोधन दिया। उनका भाषण भारत की वैश्विक स्थिति, विकास यात्रा और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय को दिए गए संदेशों पर केंद्रित रहा। आइए सुनते हैं जरा उनके भाषण के मुख्य अंश।
नमस्कार। जून में अभी मानव इतिहास के सबसे बड़े चुनावों में भारत के लोगों ने मुझे लगातार तीसरी बार सेवा का अवसर दिया है और आज मैं इसी 1/6 ऑफ ह्यूमैनिटी की आवाज आप तक पहुंचाने यहां आया हूं। फ्रेंड्स, जब हम ग्लोबल फ्यूचर की बात कर रहे हैं तो ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक अप्रोच सर्वप्रथम होनी चाहिए। सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट को प्राथमिकता देते हुए हमें मानव कल्याण, फूड, हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी ये भी सुनिश्चित करनी होगी। भारत में 250 मिलियन लोगों को गरीबी से बाहर निकालकर हमने यह दिखाया है कि सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट कैन बी सक्सेसफुल। सक्सेस का हमारा यह अनुभव हम ग्लोबल साउथ के साथ साझा करने के लिए तैयार हैं। फ्रेंड्स, सक्सेस ऑफ ह्यूमैनिटी lies in our collective strength, not in the battlefield। और वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है। रिफॉर्म इज द की टू रिलेवेंस। अफ्रीकन यूनियन को नई दिल्ली समिट में G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता इसी दिशा में एक महत्वपूर्ण कदम था। वैश्विक शांति और सुरक्षा के लिए एक तरफ आतंकवाद जैसा बड़ा खतरा है, तो दूसरी तरफ साइबर, मैरीटाइम, स्पेस जैसे अनेक संघर्ष के नए नए मैदान भी बन रहे हैं। इन सभी विषयों पर मैं जोर देकर कहूंगा कि ग्लोबल एक्शन मस्ट मैच ग्लोबल एम्बिशन। फ्रेंड्स, टेक्नोलॉजी के सेफ और रिस्पॉन्सिबल यूज के लिए बैलेंस रेगुलेशन की आवश्यकता है। हमें ऐसी ग्लोबल डिजिटल गवर्नेंस चाहिए जिसमें राष्ट्रीय संप्रभुता और अखंडता अक्षुण्ण रहे। डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर शुड बी ए ब्रिज, नॉट अ बैरियर। ग्लोबल गुड के लिए भारत अपना डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पूरे विश्व से साझा करने के लिए तैयार है। फ्रेंड्स, भारत के लिए वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर एक कमिटमेंट है। यही कमिटमेंट हमारे वन अर्थ, वन हेल्थ और वन सन, वन वर्ल्ड, वन ग्रिड जैसे इनिशिएटिव्स में भी दिखाई देता है। पूरी मानवता के हितों की रक्षा और वैश्विक समृद्धि के लिए भारत मनसा वाचा कर्मणा से काम करता रहेगा। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
तो आपने सुना, देखा कि पीएम मोदी ने कैसे बहुत ही मुख्य बिंदुओं को यहाँ पे उठाया है, जैसे कि वैश्विक सहयोग और समावेशिता यानी कि ग्लोबल कोलैबोरेशन एंड इंक्लूसिवनेस। पीएम मोदी ने वैश्विक चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए सहयोग की आवश्यकता पर बल दिया। उन्होंने कहा कि सभी देशों को एक साथ मिलकर वैश्विक समस्याओं का समाधान करना चाहिए, चाहे वह जलवायु परिवर्तन हो या महामारी जैसी स्वास्थ्य संकट। वहीं उन्होंने विकास और सततता पर भी जोर दिया, यानी कि डेवलपमेंट ऑफ सस्टेनेबिलिटी। उन्होंने सतत विकास और नवीनीकरण ऊर्जा में भारत की उपलब्धियों पर चर्चा की। मोदी ने भारत की सौर ऊर्जा और हरित ऊर्जा के प्रति प्रतिबद्धता का उल्लेख किया और अन्य देशों से भी इस दिशा में अधिक प्रयास करने की अपील की है। तो वहीं उन्होंने वैश्विक दक्षिण का प्रतिनिधित्व यानी कि रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द ग्लोबल साउथ, उसमें उन्होंने मोदी ने कहा कि भारत विश्व में वैश्विक दक्षिण यानी कि कम विकसित और विकासशील देशों की आवाज को प्रतिनिधित्व देने का प्रयास कर रहा है। उन्होंने वैश्विक न्याय पर जोर दिया और विकासशील देशों के लिए अधिक वित्तीय और तकनीकी सहायता की मांग की। साथ ही इन्होंने आतंकवाद के खिलाफ सख्त संदेश भी दिए, यानी स्ट्रॉन्ग मैसेज अगेंस्ट टेररिज्म। प्रधानमंत्री ने आतंकवाद के खिलाफ एक बार फिर कड़ा संदेश दिया और इसे वैश्विक शांति के लिए सबसे बड़ा खतरा बताया। बिना किसी का नाम लिए उन्होंने आतंकवाद को समर्थन देने वाले देशों पर भी निशाना साधा। वहीं यूएनजीसी के सुधार का भी मुद्दा इन्होंने जोर शोर से उठाया है। द इशू ऑफ यूएनजीसी रिफॉर्म। पीएम मोदी ने संयुक्त राष्ट्र सुरक्षा परिषद यानी यूएनएससी में सुधार की आवश्यकताओं पर बल दिया और भारत की अस्थायी सदस्यता के लिए मांग की। उन्होंने कहा कि वैश्विक निर्णय लेने के लिए प्रक्रिया में विविधता और व्यापक प्रतिनिधित्व आवश्यक है। तो डिजिटल और तकनीकी प्रगति को भी लेकर के मोदी मुखर रहे। उन्होंने भारत की डिजिटल अर्थव्यवस्था, वित्तीय समावेश और डिजिटल रूपांतरण की सफलताओं का उल्लेख किया। उन्होंने डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की अवधारणा को अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर प्रस्तुत किया। मोदी का संबोधन आत्मविश्वास से भरा और भारत की प्रगति और वैश्विक जिम्मेदारियों को रेखांकित करने वाला था। उन्होंने अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय को एकता, विकास और शांति की दिशा में कदम बढ़ाने का भी संदेश दिया। अगर बात करें भारत और पाकिस्तान की, तो भारत और पाकिस्तान ने एक दूसरे पर आरोप लगाया, विशेष रूप से जम्मू कश्मीर विवाद और आतंकवाद के मुद्दों पर। भारत के आरोप यह थे कि भारत ने पाकिस्तान पर आतंकवाद को समर्थन देने का आरोप लगाया, खासकर जम्मू कश्मीर में। भारतीय प्रतिनिधि ने कहा कि पाकिस्तान ने आतंकवादी संगठनों को प्रोत्साहित किया है और यह एक वैश्विक सुरक्षा के लिए खतरा है। भारत ने संयुक्त राष्ट्र से पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ कड़े कदम उठाने की मांग की है। संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा यानी यूएनजीए के 79वें सत्र में भारत का प्रतिनिधित्व विदेश मंत्री एस जयशंकर ने किया। आइए सुनते जरा उनके भाषण।
I now give the floor to His Excellency Sabrahmanyam Jaishankar, Minister for External Affairs of India.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished members of the General Assembly, greetings and namaskar from 1.4 billion people of Bharat. I congratulate the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang, and strongly support the 79th UN General Assembly's theme of leaving no one behind. Madam President, we are gathered here at a difficult time. The world is yet to recover from the ravages of the COVID pandemic. A war in Ukraine is well into its third year. The conflict in Gaza is acquiring wider ramifications. Across the global south, development plans have gone off rails and SDG targets are receding. But there is more. Unfair trade practices threaten jobs, just as unviable projects raise debt levels. Any connectivity that flouts sovereignty and territorial integrity acquires strategic connotations, especially when it is not a shared endeavor. Technology advancements, which have long been a source of hope, are now equally a factor of anxiety. Climate events occur with greater intensity and frequency. Food security is as worrisome as health security. In truth, the world stands fractious, polarized, and frustrated. Conversations have become difficult, agreements even more so. This is surely not what the founders of the United Nations would have wanted of us. Madam President, almost exactly 8 decades ago, the first steps towards the formation of the UN were taken near here at Dumbarton Oaks. Refined thereafter at the Yalta Conference, they were finally approved in San Francisco. The debates of that era centered around how to ensure world peace, a prerequisite for global prosperity. Today, we find both peace and prosperity equally endangered. And that, Madam President, is because trust has eroded and processes have broken down. Countries have extracted more from the international system than they have put into it, enfeebling it in the process. We see that vividly in every challenge and every crisis. Reforming multilateralism is therefore an imperative. The urgency of this call is highlighted by the theme of this session. Leaving no one behind means advancing peace, ensuring sustainable development, and strengthening human dignity. This cannot be delivered by a UN paralyzed when faced with division, conflict, terrorism, and violence. Nor can it be advanced if access to food, fuel, and fertilizer is jeopardized. When capturing markets lacks restraints, it damages the livelihood and social fabric of others. Evasion of climate action responsibilities by the developed undermine the growth prospect of the developing. Indeed, when resource crunch limits the very pursuit of SDG targets, it is not just economies, but human dignity itself that is imperiled. If the world is in such a state, this body must ask itself, how has this come to pass? The problems arise from a combination of structural shortcomings, political calculations, naked self-interest, and yes, disregard for those left behind. It is natural to feel overwhelmed by what we confront now. After all, there are so many dimensions, different moving parts, issues of the day, and the changing landscape. But every change must begin somewhere, and there is no better place than where it all started. We, the members of the United Nations, must now seriously and purposefully address ourselves to that task. Not because it is a competition for influence or a squabble for positions, but because if we carry on like this, the state of the world is only going to get worse. And that could mean that more of us are going to be left behind. Madam President, as the world contemplates these concerns, India has sought to respond in a variety of ways. First, by focusing on the issues of the vulnerable, women, farmers, and youth, and fashioning targeted policies and initiatives for their betterment. Assured access to piped water, to electricity, to cooking gas, and new homes are changing millions of lives. The gender gap has started to close, be it in health, in education, or in the workplace. Our food producers, thrice a year, get financial support at the click of a button. And a third-term government has made skilling of the youth its key priority. Second, by expanding opportunities for employment and for entrepreneurship, including through stronger training and large-scale financial incentives. 495 million mudra loans have been given to small businesses in the last decade. 67% of them are to women. Equally telling, 6.56 million street vendors have availed of 8.85 million Swanidhi loans. This is just in the last 4 years. 45% of the beneficiaries are again women. Third, by creating templates that are replicable elsewhere. It could be digital delivery or enhancing the quality of governance and public services, as indeed making medicines and health facilities accessible and affordable. A digital public infrastructure and a people's pharmacy are today examples of what India can readily offer to the world. It is also an alternative vision where technology is used to empower, not to dominate. Fourth, by encouraging the Global South to voice its shared concerns and come together. To that end, we have convened 3 Global South summits, the most recent in August of 2024. And fifth, by contributing to the well-being of the global commons and responding to the pressing needs of those in distress. This has ranged from undertaking projects in 78 nations, providing resources to neighbors, and responding to HADR situations, to supplying medicines and ensuring maritime safety and security. Madam President, given the scale of transformation underway in India, each of these dimensions underline that the world's problems can indeed be tackled, and that by working together, we can surely create a larger lifting tide. In these troubled times, it is necessary, Madam President, to provide hope and rekindle optimism. We have to demonstrate that big changes are possible and not over a long period. And nothing is more powerful in this regard than the transformative potential of the digital. We have seen its impact in our daily lives in India over the last decade. It is visible when public benefits from nutritional support and housing to energy and health are delivered efficiently and on a vast scale. Or when small business loans and farmers' support are extended without using intermediaries. In fact, when street vendors and expat workforce confidently use fintech in their regular transactions. When services delivery and benefits move seamlessly and transparently, less people will be left behind. That, Madam President, is India's experience and India's relevance. Such leapfrogging possibilities, coupled with people-centric policies and visionary leadership, can be real game changers. When India lands on the moon, rolls out its own 5G stack, dispatches vaccines worldwide, embraces fintech, or houses so many global capability centers, there is a message here. Our quest for a Viksit Bharat or a developed India will understandably be followed closely. Madam President, an important cause of many getting left behind has been the unfairness of the current globalization model. Over-concentration of production has hollowed out many economies, impacting their employment and social stability. Democratizing global production, building resilient supply chains, ensuring trusted digital services, and espousing an open source culture. All these promote widespread prosperity. There are economic answers, just as there are social ones. Madam President, the UN has always maintained that peace and development go hand in hand. Yet, when challenges to one have emerged, due regard has not been given to the other. Clearly, their economic implications for the weak and vulnerable need to be highlighted. But we must also recognize that conflicts themselves must be resolved. The world cannot be fatalistic about the continuation of violence on a large scale, no more than be impervious to its broader consequences. Whether it is the war in Ukraine or the conflict in Gaza, the international community seeks urgent solutions. These sentiments must be acknowledged and acted upon. Madam President, the UN is a testimony to the agreed principles and shared objectives of the world order. Respect for international law and commitments are among the foremost in that regard. If we are to ensure global security and stability, then it is essential that those who seek to lead set the right example. Nor can we countenance egregious violations of our basic tenets. Terrorism is antithetical of everything that the world stands for. All its forms of and manifestations must be resolutely opposed. The sanctioning of global terrorists by the United Nations should also not be impeded for political reasons. Madam President, many countries get left behind due to circumstances beyond their control. But some make conscious choices with disastrous consequences. A premier example is our neighbor, Pakistan. Unfortunately, their misdeeds affect others as well, especially the neighborhood. When this polity instills such fanaticism among its people, its GDP can only be measured in terms of radicalization and its exports in the form of terrorism. Today, we see the ills it sought to visit on others, consume its own society. It can't blame the world. This is only karma. Madam President, a dysfunctional nation coveting the lands of others must be exposed and must be countered. We heard some bizarre assertions from it at this very forum yesterday. So let me make India's position perfectly clear. Pakistan's cross-border terrorism policy will never succeed, and it can have no expectation of impunity. On the contrary, actions will certainly have consequences. The issue to be resolved between us is now only the vacation of illegally occupied Indian territory by Pakistan, and of course, the abandonment of Pakistan's long-standing attachment to terrorism. Madam President, the global order is inherently pluralistic and diverse. The UN began with 51 members. We are now 193. The world has changed profoundly, and so have its concerns and its opportunities. But to address both, and indeed to strengthen the order itself, it is essential that the UN be the central platform for finding common ground. And that it certainly cannot be by remaining anachronistic. Large parts of the world cannot be left behind when it comes to deciding the key issues of our times. An effective and efficient UN, a more representative UN, and a UN fit for purpose in the contemporary era is essential. Let us therefore send out a clear message from this UNGA session. We are determined not to be left behind. By coming together, sharing experiences, pooling resources, and strengthening our resolve, we can change the world for the better. I thank you, Madam President.
अभी आपने सुना किस तरह से जयशंकर साहब ने सिर्फ पाकिस्तान को ही नहीं पूरे दुनिया को धो डाला। उन्होंने कहा कि वैश्विक सुधार की आवश्यकता है, यानी कि एस जयशंकर ने संयुक्त राष्ट्र और विशेष रूप से सुरक्षा परिषद यूएनएससी में सुधार की आवश्यकता पर बल दिया। उन्होंने कहा कि मौजूदा वैश्विक ढांचा अब आधुनिक समय की चुनौतियों का सामना करने में सक्षम नहीं है और इसलिए इसमें सुधार करना आवश्यक है। उन्होंने विशेष रूप से भारत की अस्थायी सदस्यता के पक्ष में भी बात की है। तो वहीं उन्होंने विकासशील देशों का अधिकार की भी बात की है। जयशंकर ने विकासशील देशों विशेष रूप से वैश्विक दक्षिण के हितों की वकालत की। उन्होंने उन देशों के अधिकार और विकास के लिए समर्थन की मांग की जो वैश्विक निर्णय लेने की प्रक्रिया में पीछे छूट गए हैं। उन्होंने विकासशील देशों के मुद्दों जैसे गरीबी, स्वास्थ्य संकट और वित्तीय असमानता पर ध्यान केंद्रित करने की अपील की है। तो वहीं आतंकवाद के खिलाफ भी कड़ा रुख दिखाया। विदेश मंत्री ने आतंकवाद के मुद्दे पर कड़ा रुख अपनाया और इसे वैश्विक शांति और सुरक्षा के लिए सबसे बड़ा खतरा बताया। उन्होंने आतंकवाद का समर्थन करने वाले देशों को कड़ी चेतावनी दी और आतंकवाद के खिलाफ एकजुट होकर काम करने की आवश्यकता पर बल दिया। तो वहीं कश्मीर मुद्दा भी भला कैसे भूल जाते। पाकिस्तान द्वारा कश्मीर का मुद्दा उठाए जाने के बाद जयशंकर ने इसे भारत का आंतरिक मामला बताया और पाकिस्तान पर आतंकवाद को प्रोत्साहित करने का आरोप लगाया। उन्होंने कहा कि जम्मू कश्मीर में मानवाधिकारों को उल्लंघन के आरोप बेबुनियादी है और यह पाकिस्तान की ओर से एक प्रोपेगेंडा है। वैश्विक सहयोग और एकजुटता की बात करें तो उन्होंने कहा कि वैश्विक चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए एकजुटता और सहयोग पर जोर दिया। कोविड-19 महामारी के दौरान भारत द्वारा दी गई मदद का उल्लेख करते हुए उन्होंने यह बताया कि भारत हमेशा संकट के समय में दूसरों की सहायता करने के लिए तैयार रहा है। तो वहीं सतत विकास और जलवायु परिवर्तन पर भी उन्होंने अपनी बात रखी। जयशंकर ने जलवायु परिवर्तन से निपटने के लिए भारत की प्रतिबद्धता और सतत विकास के लक्ष्यों की दिशा में उठाए गए कदमों का भी जिक्र किया। उन्होंने वैश्विक स्तर पर जलवायु कार्रवाई में और अधिक वित्तीय तकनीकी सहायता की मांग की है। एस जयशंकर के भाषण ने भारत के वैश्विक स्थिति, आतंकवाद के खिलाफ कड़ा रुख और वैश्विक संस्थाओं में सुधार की आवश्यकता को स्पष्ट रूप से सामने रखा। उन्होंने विकासशील देशों के अधिकारों की वकालत करते हुए वैश्विक स्तर पर भारत की सकारात्मक भूमिका को उजागर किया है। तो वहीं अगर बात करें पाकिस्तान के, तो पाकिस्तान के आरोप यह थे कि पाकिस्तान ने जम्मू कश्मीर के मुद्दे को उठाया और आरोप लगाया कि भारत कश्मीर में मानवाधिकारों का उल्लंघन कर रहा है। पाकिस्तान ने कश्मीर को विवादित क्षेत्र कहा और संयुक्त राष्ट्र से हस्तक्षेप करने की मांग की। उन्होंने यह भी कहा कि भारत ने कश्मीर में जनसंख्या का जनांकीय परिवर्तन करने का प्रयास किया है। दोनों देशों के बीच आरोप प्रत्यारोपों का मुद्दा कोई नई बात नहीं है और यूएनजीए के स्तर पर अक्सर यह देखा गया है कि दोनों देश अपनी अपनी स्थिति को जोरदार तरीके से पेश करते हैं। इस बार का यूएनजीए 79 में भी पाकिस्तान हर बार की तरह एक ही रोना रोता रहा। हाँ, यूएनजीए के 79 सत्र में भी पाकिस्तान ने हर बार की तरह अपने पुराने मुद्दे को उठाया। पाकिस्तान ने फिर से जम्मू और कश्मीर के मुद्दे को उठाते हुए भारत पर मानवाधिकार उल्लंघन का आरोप लगाया और संयुक्त राष्ट्र से इस मामले में हस्तक्षेप करने की मांग की। पाकिस्तान ने कश्मीर को एक विवादित क्षेत्र बताया और वहां की स्थिति को अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय के सामने पेश करने का प्रयास किया। हालांकि भारत ने इस बार कड़ी प्रतिक्रिया दी और पाकिस्तान पर आतंकवाद को प्रोत्साहित करने का आरोप लगाया। भारतीय प्रतिनिधि ने स्पष्ट किया कि पाकिस्तान कश्मीर मुद्दे को केवल अपनी विफलताओं को छिपाने के लिए अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंचों पर उठाता है और इस बात पर भी जोर दिया जाता है कि कश्मीर भारत का भी हिस्सा है। पाकिस्तान का यह रवैया संयुक्त राष्ट्र में पहले भी देखा गया है, जहां वह बार बार कश्मीर मुद्दे को उठाने की कोशिश करता रहता है, लेकिन उसे व्यापक समर्थन नहीं मिलता है।
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mohammed Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, heads of state and government, excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning. Qala ya abati inni raitu
And he said, "Oh my father, I have seen 11 planets and the sun and moon bowing to me." He said, "Oh son, do not tell your story to your brothers. They will devise a scheme for you. The devil is the enemy of humans."
Honor for me to address the United Nations General Assembly for the second time as the Prime Minister of a country that has always been a proactive member of the UN Assembly. I would like to congratulate you and wish you all the success, Mr. President, on your election as the President of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly. I would also like to appreciate the efforts of Ambassador Dennis Francis for his skillful stewardship of the 78th session of the UNGA. Mr. President, the father of our nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, declared in 1947 that we stand by the United Nations Charter and will gladly make our full contribution to peace and prosperity of the world. Pakistan has stood by this commitment unwaveringly. Today, we are facing most daunting challenges to the world order. Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, a dangerous conflict in Ukraine, destructive conflicts across Africa and Asia, rising geopolitical tensions, resurging terrorism, galloping poverty, stifling debt, and the mounting impact of climate change, we feel the chill of a new world order. In response to these challenges, our Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for the Summit of the Future. It led to the adoption of the 54 actions on development, peace and security, technology and global governance in the Pact of the Future. Mr. President, today I stand before you to express the searing pain and anguish of the people of Pakistan at the plight of the people of Gaza. Our heart bleeds as we witness the tragedy unfolding in the Holy Land, a tragedy that shakes the very conscience of humanity and the foundation of this institution. Mr. President, can we as human beings remain silent while children lie buried under the rubble of their shattered homes? Can we turn a blind eye to mothers cradling the lifeless bodies of the children? This is not just a conflict, this is systematic slaughter of innocent people of Palestine. Ladies and gentlemen, an assault on the very essence of human life and dignity. The blood of Gaza's children stains the hands of not just the oppressors, but also those who are complicit in prolonging this cruel conflict. When we ignore their endless suffering, we diminish our humanity. It is not enough to condemn, Mr. President. We must act now and demand an immediate end to this bloodshed. We must remember that the blood and sacrifice of the innocent Palestinians will never go waste. We must worry about their plight and difficulties and stand by them. We must work for a durable peace through the two-state nation. We must seek a viable, secure, contiguous and sovereign state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds Al-Sharif as its eternal capital, and to advance the goals these goals, Palestine must also be immediately admitted as a full member of the United Nations. Mr. President, in a span of a few days, Israel's unrelenting bombing of Lebanon has killed over 500 people, including women and even small children. The failure to implement UN resolutions has emboldened Israel. It threatens to drag the entire Middle East into a war whose consequences could be very grave and beyond imagination. Similarly, like the people of Palestine, the people of Jammu and Kashmir too have struggled for a century for their freedom and right to self-determination. Instead of moving towards peace, India has resiled from its commitments to implement the Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir. These resolutions mandate a plebiscite to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to exercise their fundamental right to self-determination. Ladies and gentlemen, since the 5th of August 2019, India has initiated unilateral illegal steps to impose what its leaders ominously call a final solution for Jammu and Kashmir. Day in and day out, 900,000 Indian troops terrorize the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir with draconian measures including prolonged curfews, extrajudicial killings, and the abduction of thousands of young Kashmiris. At the same time, in a classic settler colonial project, India is seizing Kashmiri lands and properties and settling outsiders into occupied Jammu and Kashmir in their nefarious design to transform the Muslim majority into a minority. This hackneyed tactic is employed by all occupying powers, but it has always failed in Jammu and Kashmir too. It shall fail by the grace of God. Ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, the Kashmiri people are resolute in rejection of the false Indian identity. The New Delhi seeks to impose upon them very, very severe conditions, and atrocities are being committed every hour. India's policy of brutal coercion and oppression in occupied Kashmir has ensured that Burhan Wani's legacy continues to inspire the struggle and sacrifices of millions of Kashmiris. Inspired by the legitimacy of their epic struggle, they remain defiant. Their heart-wrenching stories remind us that behind every statistic lies a human life, a dream deferred, and a hope shattered. Even more worryingly, it is engaged in massive expansion of its military capabilities, which are essentially deployed against Pakistan. Its war doctrines envisage a surprise attack and a limited war under the nuclear overhang. Thoughtlessly, India has spurned Pakistan's proposals for a mutual strategic restraint regime. Its leadership has often threatened to cross the line of control and take over Azad Kashmir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, let me state in no uncertain terms that Pakistan will respond most decisively to any Indian aggression. Therefore, to secure durable peace, India must reverse the unilateral and illegal measures it has taken since 5th of August 2019 and enter into a dialogue for a peaceful resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the UN security resolutions and the wishes of the Kashmiri people. Mr. President, remember, illegal occupation creates a fresh hell every day in the killing fields of Palestine and in the pristine valleys of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Apart from conflicts, Mr. President, the 21st century has brought a cascade of crises, including the reversal of development and the mounting impact of climate change. 2 years ago, my country was devastated by catastrophic floods, causing $30 billion in damages. It is now clear that each summer will bring blistering temperatures and trigger fresh climate impacts. Pakistan emits less than 1% of global carbon emissions, yet we have paid a very heavy price for no fault of ours. This is most unfair in any calculus of global justice. We must uphold the axiom, the polluter must pay. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan looks forward to fulfillment of commitments made by our development partners to support the achievements of the SDGs and climate goals, including a new annual goal beyond $100 billion in climate finance. Mr. President, with nearly 100 developing countries trapped in the vicious cycle of debt and liquidity crisis, which I always call a death trap rather than debt trap, achieving the SDGs in these circumstances remain a distant mirage. The international financial architecture, which the Secretary General has described as morally bankrupt, and the world trade and technology regimes must be reformed and aligned to promote development and global equity. Mr. President, since assuming office in March this year, the progress and prosperity of my 240 million people has been my singular focus. We have taken some very difficult but necessary decisions that have rescued our economy from collapse, restored macroeconomic stability, controlled physical deficits and strengthened our reserves. As a result, inflation has come down to a single digit by the grace of God, and the prospects for economic growth has revived. I would like to explain this challenge and the way we are negotiating, Mr. President, by reciting a stanza from a poem which enormously makes me very emboldened, very brave and hardworking, and commit untiring efforts. And this stanza is a befitting example of hard work and of course facing challenges and then pave the way for success stories. And stanza is, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you are trudging is all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you are trudging seems all uphill, when the credits are low and debts are high, when the credits are low and debts are high, when you want to smile but you have to sigh, when you want to smile you have to sigh, when care, read health, when care is pressing you down a bit, when care or health is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. This is how, Mr. President, we have learned to face our challenges and negotiate the most daunting challenges we have faced. Mr. President, situated at the crossroads of South and Central Asia and the Middle East, we have prioritized geoeconomics and regional connectivity to secure win-win outcomes for our people. The second phase of the landmark China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has been successfully launched through the APEX Special Investment Facilitation Council. We are mobilizing investments in resilient infrastructure, renewable energy, minerals, sustainable agriculture and technology. This will herald a new era of development and modernization in my beloved country. Ladies and gentlemen, for 2 decades, Pakistan has fought terrorism boldly and most successfully, defeating terrorist groups within Pakistan. We have paid a very heavy price. 80,000 of our brave soldiers and civilians have been martyred, including innocent school-going children. And the gory memories of APS school carnage haunt us till date. Our economy has suffered a loss of $150 billion. Unfortunately, today we are again confronted by a new wave of externally financed and sponsored terrorism, especially by the TTP, Fitna al-Khawarij and its associates. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, inshallah, by the grace of God, we are determined to eliminate this threat as well through our comprehensive national effort by the name of Azm-e-Istehkam, meaning resolve to promote peace and stability. And we will work collectively with the international community to combat all forms of terrorism and reform the global counter-terrorism architecture. Mr. President, Pakistan seeks the earliest possible normalization of the situation in Afghanistan. We join the UN's appeal for $3 billion in humanitarian assistance to the millions of suffering Afghan brothers and sisters. At the same time, we endorse and share the international expectations that the Afghan interim government would respect human rights, including the rights of women and girls, and promote political inclusion. In particular, the interim government must take effective action to neutralize all terrorist groups within Afghanistan, especially those responsible for cross-border terrorism against neighboring countries. These include ISIL-K, Daesh, the Al-Qaeda-associated TTP, Fitna al-Khawarij, Majid Brigade, the BLA, and other terrorist groups which unfortunately are seen on Afghan territory. Mr. President, another troubling global development is the escalation of Islamophobia, which is now manifested by frequent desecrations of the Holy Quran, attacks on mosques, negative stereotyping of Muslims, and acts of discrimination and violence against them. The most alarming manifestation of Islamophobia is the Hindu supremacist agenda in India. It aggressively seeks the subjugation of 200 million Muslims and the obliteration of India's Islamic heritage. Pakistan and the OIC will work with the UN Secretary General and the Special Envoy to implement a plan of action to combat the scourge. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan seeks an immediate end to the tragic conflict in Ukraine and its peaceful resolution in accordance with the UN Charter and international agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has a long and proud history of solidarity, friendship, and cooperation with the nation of Africa. We will continue to cooperate with them to counter terrorism and resolve regional conflicts, including through UN peacekeeping and peace building in the region. Finally, Mr. President, as we leave this august hall, we must carry with us a message for our people that the weak are not voiceless, that the oppressed should not lose hope, that poverty is not preordained, and that Allah Almighty promise of justice and equality in our terrestrial home must be respected. I thank you all and thank you very much for your time. God bless you.
संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा में राइट टू रिप्लाई का अधिकार दिया गया है, जिसका मतलब है कि किसी देश को यह अधिकार है कि वह किसी अन्य देश से यानी अन्य सदस्य देश द्वारा उसके खिलाफ लगाए गए आरोपों का टिप्पणियों का जवाब दे सके। यह एक औपचारिक प्रक्रिया जिसका उपयोग सदस्य देश तब करते हैं जब उन्हें लगता है कि उनके खिलाफ लगाए गए आरोपों का स्पष्टीकरण या जवाब देने की जरूरत है। राइट टू रिप्लाई का उद्देश्य यह सुनिश्चित करना है कि किसी भी देश का उसका पक्ष रखने का अधिकार मिले और महासभा में सभी देशों के विचारों का सम्मान हो। यह एक आवश्यक तंत्र है ताकि किसी भी बयान या आरोप का संतुलित उत्तर दिया जा सके। इसी के तहत पाकिस्तान और भारत ने अपने अपने राइट टू रिप्लाई का उपयोग कर एक दूसरे को जवाब दिया है। आइए सुने जरा उनका भी।
I call on the representative of India.
Mr. President, this assembly regrettably witnessed a travesty this morning. A country run by the military with a global reputation for terrorism, narcotics trade, and transnational crime has had the audacity to attack the world's largest democracy. I speak about the reference to India in the speech of the Pakistani Prime Minister. As the world knows, Pakistan has long employed cross-border terrorism as a weapon against its neighbors. It has attacked our parliament, our financial capital Mumbai, marketplaces, and pilgrimage routes. The list is long. For such a country to speak about violence anywhere is hypocrisy at its worst. It is even more extraordinary for a country with a history of rigged elections to talk about political choices, that too in a democracy. The real truth is that Pakistan covets our territory and in fact has continuously used terrorism to disrupt elections in Jammu and Kashmir, an inalienable and integral part of India. A reference has been made to some proposal of strategic restraint. There can be no compact with terrorism. In fact, Pakistan should realize that cross-border terrorism against India will inevitably invite consequences. It is ridiculous that a nation that committed genocide in 1971 and which persecutes its minorities relentlessly even now dare speak about intolerances and phobias. The world can see for itself what Pakistan really is. Mr. President, we are talking about a nation that for long hosted Osama bin Laden, a country whose fingerprints are on so many terrorist incidents across the world, whose policies attract the dregs of many societies to make it their home. Perhaps it should come as no surprise that its Prime Minister would so speak in this hallowed hall. Yet, we must make clear how unacceptable his words are to all of us. We know that Pakistan will seek to counter the truth with more lies. Repetition will change nothing. Our stand is clear and needs no reiteration. Thank you, Mr. President.
I call on the representative of Pakistan.
Mr. President, my delegation is obliged to exercise its right of reply in response to the baseless and misleading assertions made by India. India continues to peddle a false narrative in this forum, year after year, relying on tactics of denial, distortion, and deflection. However, these distortions cannot alter the reality that Jammu and Kashmir is an internationally recognized disputed territory. It has never been, nor will ever be, a part of India, nor is it an internal matter. The United Nations Security Council, through numerous resolutions, has unequivocally called for a free, impartial plebiscite to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination. India is obligated under Article 25 of the UN Charter to implement these resolutions. Yet, instead of honoring its obligations, India has chosen the path of repression, subjecting the legitimate aspirations of the Kashmiri people for self-determination through a brutal and oppressive occupation. India's illegal and unilateral actions of 5 August 2019 further intensified this occupation, with nearly 1 million soldiers deployed to suppress the Kashmiris' legitimate right. My Prime Minister shed a spotlight on these facts today, which may be uncomfortable for India, yet this remains the truth, which India cannot deny through its sophistry. Mr. President, India's crimes in IIOJK are heinous and committed with impunity. Innocent civilians, including women and children, are being targeted through staged encounters, extrajudicial killings, and collective punishment. Entire villages have been razed. The entire Kashmiri political leaders remain incarcerated, and a media blackout continues to stifle independent voices. This is the largest military occupation in the world, where over 8 million Kashmiris live in a perpetual state of siege and horror. The reports of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and statements from over a dozen UN Special Rapporteurs have documented these widespread violations and called for the investigation of human rights violations in IIOJK. Yet, India has consistently denied them access to the occupied territory. Mr. President, India has once again resorted to the familiar tactic of deflecting global attention from its own terror activities by raising baseless accusations of terrorism. It is ironic that a country which uses terrorism as an instrument of state policy against its neighbors should attempt to point fingers at others. India, which has been sponsoring terrorism and orchestrating assassination campaigns, is hardly in a position to lecture others on this issue. In addition to its state terrorism against the defenseless people of IIOJK, India continues to sponsor terror activities not only against Pakistan but also in other countries. For decades, India has been the primary perpetrator, supporter and financer of terrorism. India's sponsorship of terrorist organizations such as Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan and the Balochistan Liberation Army has led to the loss of thousands of innocent Pakistani lives. Pakistan has shared irrefutable evidence of India's involvement in terrorism with the international community. The arrest and conviction of Kulbhushan Yadav, a serving Indian naval officer and an operative of India's intelligence agency RAW, is irrefutable evidence of India's state-sponsored terrorism against Pakistan, including targeted assassinations in Pakistan. Now, the Indian terrorist franchise has gone global, with assassinations and attempted murders of political dissidents on North American soil. Mr. President, the delegation of India referred to the events of 1971, which were not a question of genocide, but of India's foreign aggression and attack on national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Pakistan. I would like to request the Indian delegation to refer to the General Assembly resolution of December 1971, which upheld the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Pakistan against the foreign invasion. Mr. President, while the Indian delegate referred to India as the biggest democracy, the world knows that the India's reign of terror against its minorities continues unabated. The BJP RSS government, which has ruled India since 2014, is imposing a reign of fear and violence, not only against the people of IIOJK, but also against its own Muslims, Christians, Dalits, and other low-caste Hindus. Islamophobia has deeply infiltrated the Indian state, where 200 million Muslims face lynching by cow vigilantes and pogroms led by RSS, often with government complicity. Muslims are facing forced conversions, disenfranchisement, restrictions like the hijab ban, and the destruction of hundreds of mosques, including the Babri Masjid, all aimed at erasing Muslim identity and culture, which are integral parts of India's history. Mr. President, India must end its state-sponsored terrorism, cease its illegal occupation of Jammu and Kashmir, and fulfill its obligations under international law. Pakistan has been and will continue to highlight India's state terrorism against our people and the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Make no mistake, Indian state terrorism in IIOJK will not be able to dampen the indomitable spirit of those seeking their inalienable right to self-determination. Nor will India's attempt to divert attention from its sponsorship of terrorism ever succeed. I thank you, Mr. President.